All right, this is Coach Lebetter here, and we're doing math, seventh grade. This is the Unit 1B. This is the second test that I've given for the Unit 1. The Unit 1 was big enough, so I wanted to divide it into two sections. So this is the last section of Unit 1. And this test basically is over decimals, like multiplying, adding, subtracting, dividing decimals. So there's the review right in front of you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work each problem on a separate piece of paper. So we're going to kind of go at that route. And then basically that's what we're going to do. All right. So I'm going to do these and I'm going to go ahead and just start writing the problems here. All right. So here we go. We are doing the Unit 1B assess review. All right. So my first problem is I have two decimals. And I did set these up where we're reviewing integers as well. Like we talked about in classroom, I want to make sure that you know the integer rule. So there's a couple of things. So when we're adding and subtracting integers, that rule is when the signs are the same, we add the numbers, but we go with the sign with the biggest number. Subtract, if the signs are the same, we're going to add the numbers and go with the sign with the biggest number. However, if one's a plus and one's a minus, we're going to subtract the numbers and we're going to still go with the biggest number, the sign on the biggest number. All right, I like to put my biggest numbers first. Now, remember we talked about in class, this here, the first thing you want to look at is the operation. If you look at the operation, that's a subtract. And so when you have a subtract, we're going to learn. Now, I know you learned in sixth grade where you keep, change. The sign on the 4/5 45.4 is a positive. And so I want you to make sure you learn the vocabulary correctly. And so what I want you to do is we are going to add the opposite to the original. So we're going to say, and I'll do the add the opposite in a different color, but we're going to say, and we're going to put, and we can do this, we can put the top first. So let's go ahead and just read it this way, 23.01 plus, so we're going to add the opposite, and the opposite of a positive 45.4 is a negative 45.4. All right, now once you have a plus sign here, now you can look at the integers. All right, I have two negatives. Well, my two negatives means I add the numbers. So I'm going to add the numbers. You can add them. It's best, I mean, I like doing it vertically. And it doesn't matter which one goes on top. You notice this is my decimals. I line up my decimals. You know, some teachers like to use a little wall thing here. And we're adding. And so I'm going to put a little kindergarten zero here. We talked about it in class. It's an imaginary zero that's there that we can just put it there. We're going to add these. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. So my answer is 68.41. Now look, now to stop, so you don't get confused about anything, I just went ahead and say that if we just go with the biggest number. So the biggest number, 23 or 45, 45 is bigger. So we'll go, it's a negative. Yes, they're both negative. So my answer is negative, but eventually as time goes, when kids are doing multiplying, they get the rules mixed up. So if we can just kind of keep the biggest number down, then kids won't make mistakes when they start doing algebra. All right, so this is my answer. All right, so let's do number 2. Number 2, if you look at it, and this is something you kind of have to know, when you see a parentheses next to another parentheses like you see here, this means multiply. Two parentheses side by side means multiply. All right, and the multiplying and dividing rule is a little different. Let's do this in a different color. So when we're doing multiplying and dividing, so the multiplying and dividing rule is you got to be careful. Two negatives, when you multiply, I mean, I'm going to put parentheses here to represent multiply. That's going to be a plus. All right, if I have two pluses when I multiply, that's still going to be a plus. If I have a minus and a plus, my answer is going to be negative. So otherwise, if you have one negative, your answer is going to be negative. If you have two negatives, when you multiply, see the little time sign here? So two negatives, when you multiply, makes a positive. That's the best way to remember these. Now, there is a little triangle thing that I like using too. I haven't talked about it in class yet because I want to see how everybody does. But if you do a little triangle like this, two negatives, if you touch these two here, that makes a positive. If you touch a negative and a positive, your answer is negative, and vice versa. I mean, it could be like that too. All right, so that's another way we could do it. You can also tell what the answer is right off the bat with multiplying and dividing. That's what's so sweet about multiplying and dividing negative numbers. Look, I have one negative. It's right there. So if I have one negative, my answer is going to be a negative. All right, so we already know my answer is a negative. So now we just have to multiply these. And this is where it's important that you can remember how to divide decimals, or multiply decimals. So I'm going to multiply these two. Remember, you don't have to line up the decimal. All right, so I'm going to multiply. So 3 times 5 is 15. You carry your 1. Now, I'm going to take this 3, and I'm basically going to take this 3 and multiply it to each of these numbers like this. And if I have a carry, then I got to add on to it. So here we go. 3 times 5 is 15. Put the 1 right there for the 15. See, we only put the 5. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 more is 10. So I put this last digit, and then I put the next digit there. So 3 times 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 more is another 10. So there we go. All right. So now I'm going to take the next digit. Now, once I finish that, and notice how I like to X mine out. I'm done with that, so I'm going to put that right there. Now I'm going to multiply the second number, and it's going to start in the second digit. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 3 is 3. We're going to add our numbers straight down vertically. So 5, 5, 3, 4. Now, here's what we talked about in class. How many numbers are behind the decimal? This one has 2 numbers behind the decimal. This one had 0 numbers behind the decimal. So you're going to see right here, look, here's my decimal, 1, 2, none here. So I got to have 2 numbers behind the decimal here. And so there we go. And so my answer is negative, remember, because it's a negative. So answer is negative 43.55. All right, so that's how you do number 2. All right, number 3 looks like full of fun, doesn't it? So number 3, you have 1.0017 minus 4.2 or 0.12 plus 3.3. Now, the challenging part here is you always want to, you can do any numbers in any order you want to. However, PEMDAS suggests you go left to right. Okay, so we're going to go left to right. Now, because 4, it's like $4, and this looks like $1 something, we're actually going to do just that part. So I'm going to cover this up. All right. So we're going to cover this up, and we're just going to do this part like we did up here. Same thing. All right. So my sign on my 4 is a positive. I'm just going to rewrite it. That's 0012 plus, because I'm adding the opposite, and the opposite of plus 4 is a minus 4.12. All right, so now if you look at these two, I'm going to do a little side math here. I call it the sample work. I always take what looks to be the bigger number and put it on top. Then put the other number that's smaller on the bottom. We're going to subtract these two. Now the minus doesn't go with the 1. I just have it here that I know I'm subtracting. Notice how many decimals I have, numbers I have behind the decimal here. I have 4. This one only has 2. So we're going to put a little kindergarten zeros here. All right. And now we're going to pretend like it's 1/200. Okay. It's like 2 zeros. So we're going to cross this out, borrow, just like you learned in elementary school. All right, so that's what I got. So this side here, and remember 4 is bigger than 1, and it's negative. So this is going to be a negative 3.1183. Now I'm going to bring down my plus 3.3. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put 3.3. All right. Now remember, we got to subtract these two. So I'll probably put this one on top. So let's put this one on top first. So we're going to take 3.3 and then take 3.1183. You see how I put the bigger number on top? I am subtracting these two together. Notice my decimals are lined up. I've got 2 numbers here, but I don't have any numbers here. So I'm going to put my little kindergarten zeros. Remember, kindergarten zeros are the little dotted zeros or numbers that you used when you were learning to write your numbers. All right, so I see this as 300, and so I'm going to borrow 1 from 300, which makes it 299. And put the 1 there, make it a 10. So 10 from 3 is, or 3 from 10 is 7. 9 and 8 is 1. 9 and 1 is 8. 2 minus 1 is 1. And 3 minus 3 is 0. And don't forget your decimal. Which one's bigger, 3.3 or 3.1? Well, hopefully you would say 3.3. So it's a positive answer. So my answer for this is going to be 0.1817. That's my answer for this whole problem here. Remember, you could mix it up. You could have done the -4 and a 3.3. You could have put those two together, but always try to put when you see a subtract sign, try to put the bigger number on top so you kind of control it that way a little better. Number 4. All right. So if you notice, this one has 3 digits. That has 2 digits. I don't count the 0 as a digit. So I'm going to put this on bottom and this on top. What do you think it means when you have 2 parentheses? Well, hopefully you know now that that means multiply. So I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to say negative 45.1 times, and then we're going to put 0.34. We don't have to line up any decimal. We don't even need to put the 0 here. I just did it so you can see. All right, look how many negatives we have. We have 2 negatives. So 2 negatives, when you multiply, make a positive. So you know your answer is already going to be positive. So we already know we can put a big plus sign there. We know it's a positive. So I'm going to do my math. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. Carry your 2. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 2 is 18. All right, so I finished this one. So I'm going to be done with that spot. Now I'm going to do 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry your 1 now. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 more is 13. All right, now I'm going to go straight down. 4, 3, that's 13. Carry your 1, that's 5, and that's 1. All right. So now here's the tough one. How many numbers are behind the decimal? Right here, here's my decimal. So this one has 1 number behind the decimal. This one has 2. So together they have 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I'll put my decimal right there. Now remember, 2 negatives make a positive. So my answer is going to be a positive 15.334. That's my final answer. All right, I'm going to turn the page and we're going to do number 5. Oh, we can do number 5 here. Number 5 is a nice, easy one. The parentheses, notice I have parentheses here. It looks like I'm trying to scare you a little bit. All the parentheses are side. Look, all the parentheses side by side. So this means all multiply. So you multiply 2 times 4. All right, that's 8. So this is 8. And then 8 times 3 is 24. Count how many negatives you have. 1, 2, 3. That's an odd number. Remember, every 2 negatives make a positive. And now look, I have a positive and a negative. So I have 1 negative left over. So 1 negative makes it a negative. Whenever you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is going to be negative. So if I have 4 negatives, every 2 make a positive. So see, in this case, I have no negatives. They become positive. But if I have, I'm just putting a bunch of negatives here. I don't even know how many I got here. I'm just doing it for fun. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7. That's an odd number. So I know my answer is going to be negative because that's a positive. That's a positive. These 2 are positive. And look, I have 1 negative left over. 1 negative left over. Okay, let's go to number 6. All right, -6 is 321 divided by 3. All right, this is a division one. All right, you got to remember this. All right, the first one goes out and goes inside the box. What do I mean by inside the box? Like that. So this would be 321. Don't worry about the negatives because, again, it's the multiplying rule and the dividing rule. How many negatives do you see? 1. So my answer is automatically going to be a negative. So you just do the numbers and then just don't worry about the sign. You can just look at it and you got it. All right, so here we go. This one goes inside. This one goes outside. So now I'm going to divide, just like you did in elementary school. 3 goes into 3 one time. Bring down your 2. 3 goes into 2 how many times? Well, this number's not bigger than that one, so it's 0. Bring down your 1. 3 goes into 21. See how 21 is bigger? 3 goes into 21 7 times. So my answer here is 107. But is it positive or negative? Well, how many negatives do you see? 1. So my answer is negative. So my answer here is going to be negative 107. See, that's the key thing about this when you get, especially when you get algebra, is remembering when do I use the multiplying rule and what is the multiplying rule? And when do I use the add and subtracting rule and what is that rule? And once you get those two basic things down, you'll make less technical errors in algebra. Number 7. All right, number 7 is another division one. How do I know? Because we know that bar right there means divide. Fraction means divide. So again, just like this one goes inside the box. This one goes outside the box. So here's my box. The inside is 4505. Remember, I don't really worry about my signs. It looks like I have one negative. So because I have one negative, I already know my answer is a negative. This is a 0.5. It's outside the box. All right, we talked about this in class. We want this to be a whole number. So I got to move the decimal till it's completely a whole number. So I move it one time. I have to find this decimal, which is right here. I don't see a decimal, so I know it's at the end. All right, I move it over one time. Remember, I got to put something in here, so I'm going to put a big 0 in there. So here's what we really have. We have 5 being divided into 4, 5, 0, 5, 0. And my decimal now is at the end. And I'm going to put it right there. Now, let's just divide. Does 4 go into 5? No. Does 4 go into 45? Yes, 9 times. Bring down our 0. Does 5 go into 0? No. Does 5 go into 5? I got to bring down my 5, don't I? Does 5 go into 5? Yes, 1 time. Now look, I still have a spot here. I have to bring it down. And how many times does 5 go into 0? 0 times. So we know our answer is negative. How many negatives do you see here? 1 here, none here. So 1 negative means you're negative when you're multiplying and dividing. So my answer is going to be negative, and it looks like 9,010. That's my answer right there. Number 8. All right, it's another divide one. So again, I have a box. So let's see if you can remember. This one goes inside the box. This one goes outside the box. So here we go. Oh, look how many negatives I have. So I have 2 negatives. When I multiply or divide, makes a positive. So we know our answer already is going to be a positive. All right, so here we go. I'm going to put this in the box. And you notice I don't put the negatives in there. There's no point in it. We just go ahead and put the numbers in there and just do the math. And then we just go by the signs. All right. I want to make this into a whole number. So how many times do I move it to make it a whole number? 1, 2, 3. So it's going to be 2. So if I move this one 3 times, I have to move this one 3 times. 1, 2. I got to move it one more time right here. That means I got to put a little 0 here. I'm going to extend this out a little bit too. Bring up my decimal. So my decimal's way over here now. Look, not hard. 2 goes into 2 one time. Bring down my 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. Bring down my 7. 2 goes into 7 3 times. That gives me 6. Subtract it, and then bring down my 8. 2 goes into 18, 9 times. 1, 2, 3, good. All right, and then look, I got one little 0 left over, so when that makes 18, I got a 0. Bring down your other 0. 2 goes into 0, 0 times. So my answer is going to, it looks like 12,000. What's a big one, isn't it? 12,390. All right. The positive or negative. So you should see that it's a positive because I have 2 negatives, which makes a positive. Very good. All right. We only got a couple more, so we're almost done. Number 9. All right. Look at the operation. This is an add and subtract one. How do I know? Because there's a big add subtract sign right there. So remember, we don't say keep, change, but it's a nice little tool to have to remember the steps. But we actually will keep the first one and we'll add the opposite. And when the opposite is negative, so we're going to say the opposite is a positive, 3.004. Okay. I mean, that's technically how you're actually supposed to say what you're doing here. So if somebody says, what's the process? You said, hey, we add the opposite. And that's exactly the way every textbook will tell you. All right. So look at this. This is 34.8. This is 3. So look at the signs. It looks like I have a negative and a positive. Remember, we don't want to say, oh, the answer is 1 negative, so the answer is negative. That's not the rule here because we're adding and subtracting. See, the key thing to this is when you study when do I use a process? So like when you're adding, if the adding, you got to check the signs and make sure that if they're the same, you add. If they're different, you subtract. All right, so I'm going to put 34.8. I'm going to line up my decimals. Put my 3.004 here. Remember, we are subtracting because they're opposite signs, so we're subtracting. So I am subtracting. This one has got to put a couple of more zeros here. I like using the kindergarten zeros. So I'm borrowing 1 from 80, get 79, put 6, 9, 7, 4 minus 3 is 1. Don't forget my decimal there. And bring down my 3. So there's my answer. All right. Which number's bigger, 34 or 3? Well, hopefully you would say 34. And the sign on 34 is negative. So my answer is going to be a negative. What's a big negative, isn't it? Negative 31.796. Last one. I know you're excited. I know I am. All right. So this one's negative 67. And that's supposed to be a decimal, not a comma, just to let you know that. Plus 32.3. All right. Look. I have an add here. So that means I don't change anything. We're not adding the opposite because we're already an add. Now, we talked about this in class. I kind of want to talk about this. When you are negative, think of this sign as negative. If you're negative or you have a friend that's being negative, you want them to be positive. So you want to change their attitude from negative to positive. Okay. And that's what we did. We changed our attitude from negative to positive. Okay. When we're positive, we don't want to change it to a negative. Just leave it positive. I mean, everything's going good. So don't change it. The only thing we got to do is check the signs. So this one's a negative. This one's a positive. That means they're different. So I subtract. So I'm going to put my bigger number up front. And then I'm going to put line up my decimals. And I'm going to subtract. 4, it's 4, ... 5. And that's 3. So my final answer here should be 35.4. But look at my number. The biggest number is a negative. And so my answer is a negative. All right. And that's it for the Unit 1B Grade 7 review. All right. I have tutorials in the morning. If you want to come in for tutorial, great. If not, that's all right with you. But I'll be there at 7:30 if you need me.